The call came at 2:47 in the morning. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I had learned a long time ago that late-night calls from unknown numbers rarely carried anything worth hearing. But something made me pick up. A voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. Weak. Fragile. Completely unrecognizable from the voice I remembered. "Please," it said. "You're the only one who can help me." I sat up slowly in the dark. Outside my window, the city was completely still. I held the phone against my ear and said nothing for a long moment. Because the person on the other end of that call was the same person who had looked my parents in the eye 5 years ago and told them a lie so precise, so carefully constructed, so completely believable that I lost everything I had ever known in the space of one conversation. And now she needed me. My name is Claire Mercer. I'm 31 years old. And the most complicated moment of my life wasn't when she destroyed it. It was when she called to ask me to save hers. Let me tell you about the life I had before the lie. I grew up in a house that looked like love from the outside. 2 parents who worked hard. A sister 3 years younger who I shared everything with. A family that showed up to things. Birthdays. Graduations. Sunday dinners that went too long and ended with everyone laughing at something only we understood. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were generous in the way people are generous when they've worked for everything they have. Careful with money. Careful with trust. Careful with the family name they had built quietly over decades. I was the older daughter. The responsible one. The one who checked in. Who called on Tuesdays. Who remembered anniversaries and picked up groceries when my mother was sick and sat with my father through 3 months of physical therapy after his knee surgery. I was 26 when it happened. Just accepted a position at a firm I had worked toward for 4 years. New apartment. New city. A life that was finally beginning to look exactly like what I had imagined. I had everything. Then my sister made one phone call. And I had nothing. I found out about the call secondhand. My mother didn't call me directly. She sent a message. 3 sentences. Formal in the way she only became when she had already made a decision, and the conversation was a notification, not a discussion. "We need to talk about what happened at Grandma's house. Your sister told us everything. We're very disappointed." Everything. I stared at that word for a long time. I had no idea what everything referred to. I called my mother immediately. She didn't answer. I called my father. He picked up on the 4th ring. His voice was the voice of a man who had already closed a door and was calling to confirm it was locked. He told me what my sister had said. That I had gone through our grandmother's house 3 weeks before she passed. That I had taken things. Jewelry. A savings account my grandmother had kept private. Documents. That I had been quietly removing pieces of our family's history for months, while everyone else was focused on saying goodbye to a woman we all loved. My hands went completely cold. None of it was true. Not a single word. I told him that. He said my sister had no reason to lie. I said neither did I. He said she had details. I asked what details. He described them. And for one terrible moment, I understood something that made the room feel smaller than it had ever felt. The details were real. I had been at the house. I had gone through things. I had taken something. But not what she said I took. And not for the reason she told them. 3 weeks before my grandmother passed, she had called me privately. Not my parents. Not my sister. Me. She asked me to come alone. Said there was something she needed handled before she couldn't handle things herself anymore. I drove 4 hours on a Thursday. She was sitting in her chair by the window. Smaller than I remembered. But her eyes were the same. Sharp and certain in the way they had always been. She gave me an envelope. Inside were documents. A letter written in her handwriting. And a key to a safety deposit box at a bank 20 minutes from her house. "This is for you," she said. "Only you. Handle it quietly." She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. I took the envelope. I took the documents. I took the key. I went to the bank the following morning before I drove home. I didn't tell anyone because she had asked me not to. That was what my sister saw. She had followed me. I didn't know that then. I found it out much later. She saw me arrive at the house alone. Saw me leave with an envelope. Saw me go to the bank. And she built a story around what she observed, a story that contained just enough visible truth to be completely believable, and she told it to our parents before I had any idea what was coming. I tried to explain, but I couldn't explain the envelope without explaining what was in it. And what was in it I had promised my grandmother I would handle quietly. So I stayed silent about the most important part. And my silence looked exactly like guilt. My parents cut me off completely. Not angrily. That would have been easier. Quietly. Phone calls that went unanswered. Messages that received no reply. A birthday that came and went without a single word from the people who had celebrated everyone before it. My father sent one email. 4 sentences. He said he was deeply disappointed. That he had expected better. That trust once broken was very difficult to rebuild. That he hoped I would reflect on what I had done. I read it 40 times. I wrote back 17 drafts. I sent none of them. Because the one thing that could have cleared everything, the contents of that envelope, I had promised to handle quietly. And keeping that promise cost me my family. I spent the first year waiting for someone to ask the right question. Nobody did. I spent the second year watching from a distance. Social media. Occasional updates from a cousin who didn't fully understand what had happened. My sister at family events I wasn't invited to. Happy. Comfortable. Filling the space I had occupied with a version of herself that had been constructed on a foundation of something I couldn't say out loud. By the third year I stopped watching. I built a life in the silence. New city. New connections. Work that filled the hours and then began to actually matter. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. I waited. Not for revenge. Just for the truth to find its own way to the surface. 2:47 in the morning. Her voice in my ear for the first time in 5 years. I listened to her explain without interrupting. She was in the hospital. Had been for 3 days. Something serious enough that 3 days and she was still calling people at 2:47 in the morning looking for help. She needed someone to handle things. Practical things. Insurance paperwork. A specific doctor she needed contacted. Decisions that required a person she trusted. She said she had called our parents first. They hadn't answered. She said she had called 3 other people. Nobody came. You were always the one who handled things, she said quietly. I didn't know who else to call. I sat in the dark for a long time after she finished. My apartment was quiet. Coffee maker on a timer. City sounds 11 floors below. I thought about 4 years of silence. About an email with 4 sentences. About 17 drafts I never sent. About a promise I kept that cost me everything. Then I said something she hadn't expected. I said I'll be there in the morning. But I also said something else. Something I had been waiting 5 years to say. And when you're well enough, I said, we need to talk about what you told them. Silence on the line. Get some sleep, I said. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt the balance of something shift. I arrived at the hospital at 8 a.m. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not the way our grandmother had looked, small with wisdom compressed into a diminished frame. Just small. The particular smallness of a person whose choices have been quietly accumulating weight for years. I handled everything she needed. Insurance paperwork. The doctor contact. The practical decisions that required someone calm and organized. I did it efficiently and without discussion. She watched me work with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of a person who understands they are receiving something they did not earn. When everything was handled, I sat down beside her bed and placed something on the blanket in front of her. A copy of my grandmother's letter. She looked at it without touching it. I found the original in the safety deposit box, I said quietly. Along with what she left me. What she specifically left me because she knew what was coming. She still didn't touch it. Grandma knew, I said. She knew you'd been going through her things looking for what she had. She knew you'd seen me at the house. She knew what you'd do with that. Her face changed in a way I hadn't expected. Not guilt. Something more complicated. Something that looked like it had been sitting behind her eyes for 5 years, waiting for a room quiet enough to finally show itself. She didn't deny it. That was the first thing that surprised me. After 5 years of silence, I had expected some version of the story she had told my parents. Defended. Refined. Made more convincing with the benefit of time. Instead, she looked at the letter on the blanket between us and told me something that rearranged everything I thought I understood. She hadn't followed me to the house. She had been there first. Our grandmother had called her too. 2 weeks before she called me. And she had given her something different. Not documents. Not a key. A conversation. She had told her that she knew what she had done. That she had known for some time. That there would be no inheritance for her through official channels because of it. My sister had left that conversation and gone looking for what she believed she was owed. When she found nothing, she had seen me arrive. And she had understood immediately that whatever our grandmother had been protecting, she had given it to me instead. The lie wasn't strategic. It was desperate. She hadn't destroyed my life because she wanted to. She had destroyed it because she was afraid of what I knew. And the truth was I didn't know anything. I was simply the one our grandmother trusted. And that had been enough to make me a threat. I left the hospital 2 hours later. I didn't forgive her that day. That's not how forgiveness works. It doesn't happen in a hospital room at 10 in the morning because the circumstances are dramatic enough. But I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I think she had been waiting longer than either of us knew. I didn't explain everything on that call. Some things take more than one conversation to dismantle. But I said enough. My father called me that evening. He didn't apologize immediately. He's not built for immediate apologies. But he said something that told me the door was open. He said I should have asked more questions. Yes, I said. You should have. We stayed on the phone for 40 minutes. The road back is longer than the road away. I know that. But I also know something else now that I didn't know 5 years ago when I sat in my apartment reading a 4-sentence email 40 times. The truth doesn't always arrive when you need it. Sometimes it arrives at 2:47 in the morning through a voice you haven't heard in 5 years, asking for the one thing it never deserved. Your help. And what you do with that moment says everything about who you became in the silence between the lie and the truth finally finding its way home.